All right, welcome to this explainer. Imagine trying to build a house, but all your materials are just dumped into one giant jumbled pile. That's kind of what chemistry was like over 1200 years ago. But then a brilliant mind named Jabir ibn Hayyan came along and transformed the field from absolute chaos into a highly ordered scientific discipline. Now, while he's often celebrated for specific discoveries, his absolute most foundational contribution was actually the science of classification.
Picture this for a second. You step inside an 8th century laboratory. You are surrounded by hundreds of strange, totally undocumented materials. You've got metals, minerals, salts, liquids, and gases just everywhere. Over here, you've got a substance that can literally melt iron. Over there, a liquid that shifts colors right before your eyes. On one table, salves that heal diseases, and sitting right next to them, incredibly deadly powders. It's a visceral, overwhelming, and just totally chaotic sensory experience.
So, faced with all that sensory overload, how do you even begin to study these materials without a system? I mean, if you're a scientist in that room trying to make sense of the universe, where do you start? Without organization, without a shared language, scientific progress is basically impossible. You can't safely mix things, you can't record your findings, and you certainly can't teach anyone else what you've learned. It would just be pure chaos.
Section 1. The chaos before chemistry. The need for order.
And chaos really is the perfect word for it. The reality of the 8th century was a web of totally scattered knowledge. Different regions were using completely different names for the exact same substance, and people were just mixing materials together without any real understanding of their underlying properties. But Jabir realized something absolutely crucial. Science requires order. He recognized that before we go discovering new substances, we need a system to understand the ones we already have. So he proposed a shared system based on observable properties in organized categories.
Section 2. Experimentation over speculation. A new methodology. To make this happen, Jabir essentially tossed out old myth and tradition. He said, let's use a repeatable physical method. Heat it, dissolve it, combine it, and observe it. Instead of viewing these substances as mysterious materials with magical properties, he actually tested them over and over again. He documented exactly how things reacted to heat, how they dissolved, how they combined, and whether they melted, evaporated, or crystallized. He completely grounded chemistry in a rigorous, physical method, relying entirely on hard evidence rather than pure speculation. A real game changer.
Section 3. The 3 major categories. Grouping by properties. By paying close attention to things like color, texture, and weight, Jabir started noticing distinct patterns. Certain materials just behaved similarly to one another. And this led him to ask a totally revolutionary question for the time. What if substances could be organized according to their properties? Now today, that logic is something you and I inherently get, right? Every chemistry textbook has organized tables. But long before the periodic table even existed, Jabir was the one who first thought to group substances together based on how they actually behaved in the physical world. His first primary group? He called them the spirits. These were volatile substances, things like camphor, ammonium compounds, and mercury. And honestly, the name makes total sense. He categorized them this way because, under heat, they would effortlessly evaporate, literally rising up into the air like spirits. He was the very first person to isolate this shared volatility as a systemic behavioral trait. Then we have the second category, metals. This encompassed materials like gold, silver, copper, iron, lead, and tin. Jabir looked really closely at their hardness, their specific weight, and exactly how they behaved when they reached their melting points. And he observed that these metals all shared common characteristics that made them entirely distinct from the spirits. His incredibly detailed, methodical examination of the specific group literally became the absolute foundation for all the later developments in metallurgy and material science. And finally, we have the third category, stones. These were your sturdy materials, sulfur-containing minerals, salts, and various rocks and ores. They generally did not melt easily at all, which meant they behaved entirely differently from both those volatile spirits and the heavy metals. By wrapping these stubborn minerals and salts into their own distinct group, it meant that, for the first time ever, systematic study of these solid substances was actually possible. Section 4. The first scientific database. Organizing knowledge. Because you see, Jabir's categories did a whole lot more than just organize physical materials on a laboratory table. They organized human thought.
His books described hundreds of materials, detailing physical characteristics and explaining precise preparation methods. And most importantly, by recording chemical reactions systematically, he enabled experiment reproduction. Instead of just leaving behind scattered random observations, future scientists could actually compare patterns. In a lot of ways, this was essentially one of the world's very earliest scientific databases. It made knowledge vastly easier to preserve, teach, and expand upon.
Section 5. The Legacy of Order. A lasting foundation. This framework he built created immense momentum across 1,200 years. Starting in the 8th century with Jabir's experimental system, these writings spread like wildfire throughout the Islamic world. Eventually, they were translated into Latin, where European scholars studied them deeply for centuries. That core idea, that substances absolutely must be organized by observable properties, survived all that time. It eventually became the intellectual foundation for scientists like Antoine Lavoisier and Dmitri Mendeleev to build the modern chemical classification systems and the periodic table that we see in chemistry textbooks today.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to consider this. Before humanity could master the secrets of matter, didn't we first have to organize them? Jabir ibn Hayyan brought order to pure, unadulterated complexity. Every single time a scientist classifies a new material today, they are participating in a 1,200-year-old tradition started by the father of chemistry, a man who proved that to understand the universe, well, we first have to speak its language. Thanks for joining me on this one.